Hey everyone, Robert here, author of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life. Are you ready to start living life to the fullest? Are you ready and willing to transform yourself and your life from ordinary to extraordinary? Welcome, my friends, to the Fully Engaged Life. Welcome back to the show, everyone. In today's episode, I would like to address the irrational nature within authentic mind and spiritual practices. You know, this idea of rational and irrational has been showing up a lot in my teaching experiences lately. Some of this is because I have students of martial arts and students of spirituality that are attaining much more advanced levels. Some of it is because this is something that needs to be shared with everyone on the spiritual path at this moment in time. So here it is. Let's begin by remembering that the brain has two hemispheres, right? So we have people that are a little bit more left brain dominant and those who are more right brain dominant. Yes, it's true, the brain, both hemispheres are activated with certain stimuli and things like that, but people definitely dwell in one side or the other. And in the information age, which we are still in, people are definitely dwelling and stuck within the left side of the brain. Now, if you missed a previous podcast where I cover all of this stuff, make sure and go back and listen to that one before you continue on here. So if we understand this, then those people who are left brain dominant think and perceive in very rational, common sense ways. They operate with a sense of rationality day in and day out. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, as there are times when being rational and applying common sense are absolutely necessary. It's a good thing. We just need to realize that there's more. And living entirely from the left brain may result in certain health problems. There are many cases of people having aneurysms or even tumors on the left side of their brain, in some cases prohibiting the use of the left side of the brain or damaging that side of the brain, which results in them being unable to access it either temporarily or indefinitely. When this happens, it results in the right brain taking over, and then they report living a much happier and more spiritually based life. Very interesting, isn't it? And this seems to just naturally take place. It isn't as though they're trying. They just start to live more from the spiritual space from being right brain dominant. Interesting how that happens, huh? Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen to you or anyone else, and I'm not giving any sort of medical advice. What I'm sharing is just some of the research I've acquired on understanding the hemispheres of the brain and some of the benefits, as well as some of the problems that can arise. We should at least consider the ramifications of spending all of our time entrenched in the left brain, thinking far too much and much too intensely, and the fact that this may cause stress on that side of the brain, which could then result in very real medical problems. And these problems can result in a mental fashion or in a physical fashion. And this is why I say that people being stuck in their head thinking all the time is a very dangerous thing. It's not good. It's not how a human being was designed to live. And energetically speaking, we could understand that thinking too much in the brain, especially with the left side of the brain, is going to cause an excess buildup of energy on that side of the brain. And this can result in energy stagnation. It can result in a sense of overheating the brain, basically boiling it through overworking it. And this is just something to consider. So because of all of this, authentic spiritual practices are designed to help us shift from the left brain into the right brain. And all of the practices take place from the right brain. In the beginning, there may be some that use left brain stuff just to help get you into that. But the real practices are done from the right brain and then eventually the entire brain. Because what we want to do in spirituality is learn how to shift out of the left brain, go into the right brain, and then eventually create a harmonious balance between these hemispheres of the brain. Each hemisphere then doing its part when appropriate and powering down when it's not needed in that moment. The left brain likes to control everything. Just look at this example. When we're young, around 7 to 9 years old, the ego begins to form. And the ego serves a purpose at that time in our life. It helps us to keep safe and to develop an identity so we're capable of navigating the physical world. This is the same age when we stop breathing from the abdomen, diaphragmatic breathing, and we begin labored chest breathing, usually upper chest too, just the upper portion of the lungs. Coincidence? No, I don't think so. The ego, left unchecked, will then move beyond its intended role and begin to take over. It takes over our thoughts, our emotions, and even certain bodily functions such as breathing, where it changes it from the natural diaphragmatic breathing to chest breathing, which is labored, hard breathing. The left side of the brain, the ego, wants to run the entire show and control everything. The result of this is that the left brain ends up doing far more than it was ever intended to do. Much too much. And we need to understand that living a fully engaged life takes place being more right brain dominant. You can't do it when you are left brain dominant. So if we understand this then, authentic mind and spiritual practices serve to restore control of such things as the breath back to the intelligence of the body and restore the natural balance between the body and mind. The mind has intelligence in the heart and the gut. There's much more brain matter in our intestines than there is in our head. And the electromagnetic field of the heart is considerably larger than that of the brain. Not to mention, the heart has a far greater capacity for memory than the brain. Science is finally catching up with things that I've been teaching for a couple decades now, and that is the communication between the gut, the heart, and the brain via the vagus nerve, and the fact that the brain isn't always sending signals down into the body telling it what to do. A lot of the times, it's the gut and the heart sending signals up to the brain. So what we need to do is we need to be able to get out of the left brain. And most people live primarily in the left brain all of their lives, with only accessing right brain dominant at very sporadic and limited moments in time throughout their life. What we're trying to do is shift from being primarily left brain to being primarily right brain. From there, we can establish a sense of balance between the hemispheres of the brain, and then we establish a balance between the body and the brain. The body and even beyond the brain into the mind, to where the body mind learns to access that intelligence and utilize the body to handle those functions. So the body does what it needs to do, the brain does what it needs to do, and the mind does what it needs to do. And this is when we create mind-body harmony. So we shift from the left brain to the right brain, and when we are in the left brain, as I was saying before, that's when we are perceiving the world through terms of being rational and making sense. When we're in the right brain, many things that we perceive seem to be irrational and of an uncommon sense nature. Things that just cannot be comprehended by the left brain. This is normal. They were designed to be that way. They have to be that way in order to access the right side of the brain. I'd like to share an example of this for clarity. My lovely, wonderful wife practices the authentic mindfulness practices. As we began to engage a very particular area of these practices in order to address a certain aspect of herself that she felt no longer served her and wanted to dissolve and let go of, something very interesting happened. We had went through 4 or 5 practices, and then I told her that that was enough for now. That's as far as we're going to go right now. I feel that we've reached a very important point, and right now we just need to stop and take a pause for a minute. We had spent maybe 30 minutes or so each evening with these practices. That's about it. Doesn't take long. But over the course of the next couple months of just relaxing, allowing what we had done to sink in, she suddenly began to notice a change in herself. She noticed that when faced with certain situations, she no longer unconsciously reacted the way she used to. Now, she was pretty elated by this because this is exactly what she wanted to work on and let go of and replace with a healthier, more conscious response. And she had managed to replace an unconscious and somewhat unhealthy reaction with a very consciously aware, healthy response that felt so much better to her. The power of mindfulness. And as this happened, and she noticed it on several occasions, she asked me a question. And the question was something like this: I don't feel like I did much of anything. Like I didn't even work hard to accomplish it. How can this happen? But you see, this is the nature of authentic mind practices. Now, allow me to explain this a little deeper. The practices require certain engagements of the mind and the body because they're somatic in nature. Then, after the practice, you have to just kind of sit and relax and allow the practice to be absorbed into the subconscious mind. When you perform these practices in a particular way, they engage the conscious, unconscious, and subconscious minds. What we are doing here is allowing it to sink into the subconscious mind so the mind can catch up to what we have been working on within the practices. It's there that it percolates for a while, and then changes are made in our perception and reactions from this subconscious level. Certain unconscious behaviors become conscious, and we have a new normal way of being. But the work is done behind the scenes in the subconscious. Now, the mind, especially when we are accessing the left brain, what happens is the mind then perceives things as, okay, I'm going to make this effort with this practice to attain this result, and it should be in a very sequential order. And the result should be directly because of the physical and mental effort I had just made. But this is not how they work, because they work with a sort of right brain perception, understanding. And in this way, it makes these practices seem very irrational and of an uncommonsensical nature. And that's actually a far greater understanding for them, is that they are irrational. They don't make sense, but they work. I mean, you wouldn't even believe some of the things we've done in martial arts and how irrational some of those things are and how unbelievable some of these things are, and yet everybody experiences it. So you see, when you engage these spiritual practices, you need to allow yourself time to then just go about your ordinary day-to-day business. While you are doing that, the brain is occupied doing what it's doing, but the subconscious mind is hard at work. It's sorting all of that stuff out. It's trying to acknowledge what it needs to do to make these necessary changes, and it's understanding it in its own way, and it's there that then the rewiring, if you will, is being done, and then all of a sudden you have changed. But it wasn't a big traumatic experience. It was seamless. And actually, the change takes place generally before we even realize it had. It isn't until we find ourselves relating to certain stimuli in a certain situation again that we realize something's different. Something has changed. Isn't that incredible? That's how these practices work. And I think it's incredibly helpful for you to understand that, because this is not something you're ever going to learn from a book, and it's something that very few teachers are going to openly share with you. But if you understand this, it breaks through all the barrier of confusion, and it allows you to understand the process and how important allowing and relaxing the process is. If you're going to dissolve and let go of anything, you have to relax and allow it to happen. Whenever we're trying so hard to force in a certain outcome, to force a result, to make something happen, we're using the willpower. And guess what? Willpower comes from the left side of the brain. So generally, it's going to be the left side of the brain that says things like, but I have to work hard in order to accomplish such a thing. And it's a very difficult endeavor. I have to go through some sort of struggle, and I have to heal, and then I can move on. But that's not how the right brain perceives these things. The right brain knows better. It realizes that this process is completely irrational, and because of this, it can be easy, and it doesn't require struggle and healing. It doesn't require you to do much of anything. It requires you to engage the practice and then just leave it alone and allow the practice to do what it does. See, this is the power of these practices. I cannot stress this enough to you. This is when you get to glimpse inside just how powerful the practices themselves can be when we can get the left side of our brain out of the way. We just allow the results to happen. This is the nature of real spiritual practice. These different mind and spirit practices work in this seemingly irrational, uncommonsensical manner. So, as my wife brought this to my attention, as it would happen here and there, I couldn't help but chuckle, because this is how these practices work, and it's incredible. And I was so thrilled for her that she attained what she was looking for, that they provided her with the ability to succeed in making these changes in herself that has taken a lot of weight off of her shoulders. And it also signals to me that she has attained a higher state of consciousness, a greater state of mindfulness. Remember, mindfulness is a state of being. It's a conscious state of being where we no longer surrender to the unconscious habits that we were used to. And you can see that this represents such a change. This is wonderful progress. Now we're able to start to move forward into the next practice. So, see, how long these practices take you to absorb things is hard to say. Everybody's different. I'll tell you from my own experiences, I was going through these practices decades ago. I actually ended up going more than 2 weeks without speaking to anyone. And you know what? I didn't even realize I was doing that. And my family never said much of anything to me. And it wasn't until one day, one of the guys I worked with came up to me And he came up and they called me Bobby. And so he says, "Hey, Bobby, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, you haven't spoken to anybody here in the plant in weeks. Are you pissed off at everybody?" And I started to laugh. And I said, "No, dude, why would I be mad at anybody? I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not mad at anything. I'm perfectly fine." And he said, "Well, did I do something to tick you off or something?" And I said, "No, not in the least." He goes, "Well, what's going on? Are you going through some sort of, serious problem or something?" And I said, "No." But see, this is what happened is I went through this practice, and during that 2-week period, things were being rearranged and rewired, and perception was being changed, and there was some big changes going on in the subconscious mind, so much so that I couldn't even put the energy and the effort into speaking. I was able to function just fine, but this was going on so much in the back of my mind, in the subconscious, that it was drawing that much power. And, then I felt bad. It was really funny, the perception of people, right? Because people thought that I was either pissed off at them or that some of the other people were saying I was stuck up. And I was like, "What are you talking about, stuck up? Well, you don't talk to anybody. You must be stuck up. Why would I suddenly become stuck up, right?" No, I wasn't angry. I wasn't going through anything. I wasn't suddenly miraculously stuck up for no reason. No, it wasn't any of that. I was just going through some stuff, right? My wife just got that reference, I'm sure. So now I'm going to grow a goatee and a rat tail. All right, no, I'm not. No way I'd get away with that. But you can see how people perceive these things because they don't know what's going on, so their mind creates a story in order to rationalize what's going on. It's completely fabricated, untrue, but they have no way of knowing what was truly going on. See how that happens? But that's how these changes can be. Some of these changes are huge, and they really get to you for a while until they've been processed. But we have to allow it to process, and that can take time. This is why you can't rush these practices. A lot of people come to me and they're like, "Okay, give me this practice, and I'm going to come back tomorrow. I want another and another and another." And they think that by collecting the practices that they're actually making the headway, and they haven't done anything, and nothing will happen because that sort of activity, that sort of rational thinking is left brain, and nothing can be done to benefit you with these practices from the left brain. However, when we succeed in shifting from the left brain to the right brain and engaging these practices, each one of these practices that are steps in attaining mindfulness, and we allow the practice to sink in, to be processed by the subconscious mind, real change can occur. This is really, really a tremendous treasure. And not only can we change those things about ourselves that we know need to change, some changes that we don't even realize need to be made will happen just automatically, completely in an unconscious level. And then we attain higher states of being, higher states of consciousness. And through this, we attain awakening. And it's meant to step us through the awakening process. So we become a little wider awake with each practice. And do your best to avoid the trap of trying to force it to make sense. That will prohibit your ability to make progress in the future. Just accept it. Just accept that it worked and keep moving forward. Relax and allow the practice to process, to sink in and be sorted out, and the change to be made by the subconscious mind. Allow the changes to happen. Give it the time it needs to happen. And then accept the fact that it happened without you understanding exactly how or why it happened. So we want to relax. We want to allow, and we want to accept. Those things will keep us moving in a forward direction, not allowing the left brain to bog us down and end up blocking us from making further progress. And right now, in the information age, everybody is very, very rational. That's because everybody is deeply entrenched in being left brain dominant. However, with the consciousness shift that we are going through right now, it is taking us out of the information age and into the intuition age, right? I wrote about this in my book. I've been talking about this for so many years. We went from the industrial age to the information age, and now we're going to go into the intuition age. This is going to take people from the left brain into the right brain. And everything in the world will seem far more irrational. But when you're in the right brain, you're okay with it. And you can understand that irrational nature of things. This is where we need to go. This is where we are going. And those who struggle to remain in the left brain and stay in this outdated information age will be left behind. So we can see this is all part of the process, and it's a greater unfolding on a cosmic scale of what is happening for humanity. And remember that you can help add energy to this consciousness shift by sharing my book and programs with people, by sharing this podcast all over social media, all over the place. Get this thing out. Go on to the YouTube channel, subscribe and like. Make sure that you do all the social media stuff. You can share it on different social media as well. That's fine. Hey, you're allowed to do that sort of thing. I don't care what we have to do as long as we can get this out. We need real spirituality in the hands of the people. We've got to help them see that spirituality is not a bunch of foofy nonsense, that there's something very, very real, and it's got practices that can yield miraculous results. And I'm doing everything I can, but I need your help. So do what you can, join forces with me, and share this stuff and get it out there. Christmas is coming, so you could purchase the books, programs, and those things and give them out to friends and family. You can work with your spouse on the practices within my book. All of the practices that I share through this podcast, I have given so much information. You have so much at your fingertips. All you have to do is get active and follow through. All you have to do is take action, and I know you will. So jump over to www.expansionmastery.com, grab those autographed books, grab the programs, and get them wrapped in under the tree for Christmas. Until next week, my friends, I wish you all the best in your practices and in your life. Take care.